Hello and welcome to bonus segment. On a previous recent episode, we were talking about tutorials in games, and I started to realize that there are probably one or two that we hadn't touched on, one in particular that I wanted to discuss here in a short segment.
Yes.
So, here we go. There were many that we discussed in that particular episode. We were talking about the more overt ones, the small sections that you could go through, the keys that would come up onto the screen for instruction. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the untutorial, which is what I'm going to call it, which is basically a tutorial that is not explicitly a tutorial area. And there's an example that I give for this that you've probably seen people talk about before, which is Super Mario 64. Yeah, that's right, folks. We're going back to the Nintendo 64 era for this.
We're going classic.
We're going classic. Get your Trident controller in your hands and try to figure out how you're supposed to hold it, because here we go.
You don't.
Yeah, I know. It was a tricky. They said that you're supposed to either hold it like this or this. It's like, or I could just hold it like this and try to reach the thumbstick in the middle, which is what I usually did. But anyway, we're talking about Super Mario 64, which probably most people played if you ever had an N64, because it usually came with the console. And what they did to actually acclimate people to the controls that you were going to need, and controls are very important when you're doing platformers, especially very tight platformers like Mario usually is. The way they introduced that, though, is with absolutely no instruction whatsoever. It starts you off where you are outside Bowser's castle, essentially. And before you ever go in through the door at Bowser's castle...
Is that Bowser's castle or Peach's castle?
It might have been Peach's castle.
I think it was Peach's castle.
It's Peach's castle because if you look at... Yeah, you're right. When I was saying that, it's like, which one is it? I can't remember. But yeah, I think the stained glass is of Peach in the window. Anyway, there's a castle. You can go into it. But before you do, there's this exterior area in, like, essentially the castle grounds that you can explore. And there's a few little signs that you can read that will explain some text if you want to, but the general idea is that all of these elements are around, from trees that you can climb to the moat around that you can swim through, and it just asks you basically, you can go through the door at any time, but isn't this a fun little place to play around in?
That's a little playground for you.
It's a little playground for you, and without you really even understanding it, if you just start pushing buttons, you'll find that you can get your jump mechanics, your triple jump mechanics. You'll see that you attach onto the trees, and then I can climb up the trees. If I get into the water, all of a sudden you see that your, little oxygen meter comes up, and you can get used to your swim mechanics and everything like that. They'll tell you about, like, manual controls if you want to control the camera. But in general, they just kind of create a smaller environment before you get into the castle and the actual levels, where you are able to basically try out and experiment with all the basic mechanics of the game right up at the front. And I found that to be a very interesting way to address the idea of tutorials, because it didn't feel like a tutorial at the time.
No, it's just letting you play around with the controls until you want to actually do something.
Exactly, and I thought that it was a very interesting way to do it, because so many times with tutorials, and I think the reason why a lot of people don't like them is because they feel so overt when they're presented to you that you're like, oh, I'm in the tutorial section now. Oh, great. I'm not actually playing the game. But the untutorial way of looking at it is that, you're doing a tutorial without even realizing you're doing the tutorial. Yeah. So I did like that idea. I don't know if you ever played 64 or if you had the game at that time.
I played it a little bit. I didn't have an N64, so I didn't really play it a lot, but I have played Mario 64.
Right. And really more than other Mario games in a lot of ways, because I've played quite a few of them, and that was the one particular one that tried that. They encouraged you to experiment with so many of the mechanics in that particular game, from the very starting screen where you have the Mario head and you realize that you can actually pull the individual elements of Mario's face, everything like that.
Terrifying.
It is terrifying. It was fascinating, but they, from that very moment, they gave you this sense of just explore, try things out, see what works for you, and you might find that it's useful in the future. So the untutorial, we didn't really talk about that when we were talking about tutorials.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin, the other untutorial or non-tutorial would be a game like Myst, which we had you play a little while ago. Where it doesn't give you a tutorial because you're meant to figure everything out on your own.
You are. They do, and I noticed this in the 2021 version at least, they do a little bit better job of, at least without you necessarily noticing, guiding you toward the interesting things that are happening.
Right. They did do a couple things a little better so you could notice it, like the map compass.
Sure.
But yeah, that game is designed to be like, figure it out yourself. Good luck.
Right, right. And well, and Myst 2 is one of those where there are very prominent, distinct elements to that entire island that are hard to miss and encourage you to kind of go toward them, and that lets you figure out the next element. It's sort of like the Bethesda model of game design, which I don't know if you had ever heard about this, but in 3 and eventually New Vegas stole it, basically. They ganked the idea is when you are initially introduced to the world at large, after the initial part, and you get out to the world itself, there should be at least 3 prominent structures that are seen on the horizon, so that people, without realizing it, are now seeing their eye drawn to certain major elements of the world before they ever get there.
Gotcha. I didn't actually hear that.
Oh yeah, so
Makes sense though.
Yeah, they did it in 3. I think you can see like Tenpenny Tower, you can see Megaton, you can see I want to say maybe the supermarket or something like that when you first leave the vault. In New Vegas, you can see the roller coaster over at Prim. You can see the New Vegas Strip. Like you can see all those. So it gives you a general orientation right up at the front before you ever start moving, of places you can go and things that are interesting elements. Myst, as an island, when you first get onto that dock, you see a sunken ship on your side. You see like an observatory like right in front of you. And as you go up the one set of stairs, you start to see there's a spaceship there, and there's a clock tower over there. There's major landmarks that draw your attention, even though they aren't giving you instruction to go there.
Yeah, you instantly want to go, what the heck is this? Why is this here?
Why is this here? Why is any of this here? So, another good way of looking at untutorial is just giving visual cues without it being overt that we want you to go to this place.
Right.
It draws your attention there. So yeah, you can do it in a lot of different games. I know you had mentioned Portal did something different as well. But
Portal was kind of really straightforward. It was a very short tutorial, but it was like, all right, here's how to look, here's how to move, here's how to do basic stuff. But then it's like, all right, now it's like figure everything else out on your own.
Right. It's
like the puzzles where you have to have the portal below you to jump into and then get launched because it preserves your momentum. Those you have to experiment with. That's a tutorial through experimentation in a lot of ways.
Right, and in a physics-based game, allowing people to explore that from a very early start is very useful because it is going to be the majority of the game past that.
Yeah.
So getting people used to the just experiment to figure out what works until you pass the challenge is very good, especially with puzzle games.
Yes.
You want to show those early and before you get into any real challenges. The initial like first test or second test of Portal are fairly straightforward and will introduce just like, one new little element about momentum or something in each one. So
Right.
that you get used to, oh, this is a new thing I could do. I didn't know that before, but that gets me to my objective. Congratulations, I have succeeded because I tried something new. And now you remember that for any future thing that you do, how I can use that and combine it with other elements. So, but yeah, untutorials. They're not easy to pull off. They do take a lot of like design and aesthetic work, but they are in some ways the most natural occurring kind of tutorials because they acclimate people to the mechanics by actually allowing you to utilize them before they become more dire circumstances that you get into.
Right.
So there we go. A Friday follow-up.
A bit of bonus content for your soul.
A little bit of bonus is what we can call it. A little bit of bonus. So, thank you for that. I'm gonna untutorial myself out of here now. I need a tutorial on how to end segments.
I think you know how to end the segment?